Welcome to class, everybody. I'm Brooke Harley. I'm the CEO and founder of Class Rebel. We're a modern education company, and it's our mission to deliver education from the streets, taught live by the street fighters who have done it, often against the odds. We believe in modern skill sets available to all and affordable to all. We believe education is a peaceful protest against class inequality and that we can disrupt modern education, how it's accessed, and what it costs. Welcome back. I see a lot of you guys that have been here in class before. You guys know how this goes. It's spicy, it's live, it's interactive, and we know that there's experience in the room, and we love to pull that experience out. So if you guys are feeling brave today and you want to roll at the front of the class with Jody, we're eventually going to ask you guys to throw up your hands, volunteer, and Jody's going to introduce herselves. And if you guys can roll, some of you with her, it makes the class a lot of fun. I'm going to do a short introduction on Jody, and then I'm going to pass it over to her. Jody's the CEO and founder of Live Kindly. We are so proud to have her as an instructor. Live Kindly's mission is to disrupt the way that the world thinks about the global food system, the impact that we have on the planet, and how we can live more kindly. You guys, Jody built a tiny vegan food blog into a media entity with 26 million in organic reach each month. And the point and purpose of this course is to get you guys 5 years ahead today in what you know about building your own movement. So the strategies and tactics that she used that you can use to build what you're building as well. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Jody. It's her first time teaching, so give her some support. And if this feels a little bit crunchy today, it might be. We're doing this for the first time for you guys, but we're really excited to teach this mini class. So I'm going to hand it over to Jody. Jody, can you share your screen? I'll stop sharing mine. Can you share yours?
Yes, 1 second. Sorry, one moment. Here we go. So everyone should be able to see the first slide right now.
Yeah, I think so. Looks good.
Good, cool. Thank you for the intro, Brooke. And I'm so excited and like humbled to be here. I've watched also, Brooke, you built this from scratch, and it's amazing to see how it's grown. And I feel really, excited to be part of this and have the opportunity to speak with everyone today. So I guess, we can talk about what the goal is of the class today, and then I can give you a little bit of background about, I guess, Live Kindly and what I've built and the journey that I've been on, and how hopefully it can help, whatever venture you're looking to build. So yeah, I think that, the key things that I want to get out of today is to share really, some of the core things that are important to kind of push your brand forward, to help it to grow, and to also, use your mission and whatever it is that it's inspiring you, and how you can bring that movement into something really big and impactful in a digital world. So the goal today will be to give you 5 important strategies and tactics around that. And I say 5, but there are so many that go into that. I think it's much more than that. And it was really hard to kind of like segment it down. And I'm so excited to kind of dive deep into this and into the full course in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, to give you a bit of background about me and Live Kindly. So Live Kindly was founded, actually it was 4 years ago in April. And it feels like so much longer than that. It's crazy, and it's been a whirlwind and a roller coaster. And I didn't anticipate, any of this to happen, but super happy that it did. And I think that, over these 4 years, I've learned so much in terms of what it takes to not only build a company, but really build a company that is purpose-driven and that is focused on creating impact and building that community around it. Because really, at the end of the day, it's the community that is the impact and the driving force for everything that we do. So yeah, I founded Live Kindly. For me, it was a personal need. I went vegan around about 7-8 years ago. I kind of forget now, it's been so long. But for me, when I was looking for, a community or, anything that was positive or inspiring, or to show me that this lifestyle was not only good for the planet and good for the animals, but also something that I could really enjoy and be part of and be inspired by and empowered by. I couldn't find that. Everything about it in terms of the media coverage and the social media marketing around it, if you want to call it marketing, was so negative. And this was also coming from very pro-vegan platforms as well. And, I don't want to jump in too deep on that subject matter right now, but what I really found that was missing was that kind of like empowering and inspiring community that really didn't judge and that allow people to focus on the solutions rather than only highlighting the problems. And obviously we know with climate change, there are so many problems to talk about, but not enough of us are talking about the solutions, and not enough of us are making it easy to do on a day-to-day basis. And we're not celebrating the small wins that we see every day. And, you maybe don't even realize, but there's quite a lot of them. And this is what we are focused on in all of our content. So yeah, that's really kind of like the purpose of my mission and the mission of Live Kindly. And I think it would be really interesting to see, if there are a few other people in the room that have other missions and other ventures that they're looking to build, something purpose driven around. And I think it would be great to maybe introduce a few people, or if anyone would like to, talk about what they're working on, that would be great.
Yeah, Ash, do we have anyone who's got their hand up to introduce themselves? Oh, we got a number. Okay, sweet. Okay. Ashley, if you can, I see many hands up. So is there anyone willing to introduce themselves, what they're working on?
I can go.
Yes. Hi, Eleanor.
Hey, how are you guys?
Good.
Thanks for having me. So I'm Eleanor Turner. I'm the founder and CEO of The Big Favorite. And most of the time, undergarments are an afterthought. They're made paper thin or worse from plastics that pollute the planet. And what do you do when you wear them out? You throw them away, and that results in almost 11 million pounds of undergarments going into US landfills daily. So we provide a solution. We ethically make super soft 100% Pima cotton undershirts and underwear for men and women that are designed to disappear through our circular system. And that means that customers can actually send the clean but worn out TBF items back to us for recycling. And that closes the loop, and they can earn rewards on future purchases.
Awesome to have you. Who else do we have on the line? We got some more hands raised, that's for sure. Okay. Oh, we got Lisa Marie. Okay, so ask to unmute. Who's on the line? Lisa, are you there?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. Can you see me okay?
We can see you. Tell us what you're building.
Awesome. So my name is Lisa Marie, and I'm the co-founder of Impact. Impact is a marketplace that helps beauty brands find more sustainable packaging solutions. So my background is that I've spent the last few years as a global brand manager at Unilever. And really what I found there was that finding packaging was just so incredibly challenging and very offline. And so when you think about finding packaging being challenging, finding sustainable packaging is even more challenging. And so our mission at Impact is really about making it easier for brands and packaging suppliers to connect and collaborate to drive the industry to more sustainable solutions.
Awesome. Good to have you. Thanks for rolling with this class and being brave. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Let's take one more person. I can see Nathan. So I'm going to ask him to unmute. He's got his hand up. Let's see if we can get him. Nathan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi.
Hi, I don't know if everyone can see me.
We can.
Okay, so what I do, I'm create a brand, Outstanding Vegan, that I start to develop. And for me, it's really about fine dining experience that I think is lacking in the vegan world. Try to create something different and a high quality experience.
Awesome, cool. Thank you for being brave and rolling with Jody in this class. So I think we have 3 people. We'll go there. And as we go through, she's going to ask you guys some questions. So we'll hand it back over to Jody.
Okay.
Thank you. Great to meet you. And Nathan, hi. Nathan actually has some videos for us on Instagram. So it's great to see so many familiar names and faces here. It's really kind of surreal and exciting to be with everyone today. But yeah, so kicking off, I guess, as I mentioned, we'll be looking at 5 key points that will kind of put you 5 years ahead. And this is just a short summary of what those will look like. Obviously, in the main, in the full course, we'll go into much more detail about all of these subjects. But yeah, I'll kind of kick off with the first one. And so hopefully you can all see my first slide, which is inspiring people toward action. And so, this is really, I guess, the first thing that I think is the foundation of the brand, obviously. And, without a mission, you really don't necessarily know what you're trying to achieve. And so for me, when I built Live Kindly, that was already there. It was there before I built it. I had this mission within me. This is what I wanted to do. I just didn't know how to go about doing it. So I kind of maybe did it in reverse to some people. Some people will have, the idea that they want to kind of build something and not really know exactly what their mission is. So depending on, whatever your starting point is, the process might look different. But, for Live Kindly, the mission was there. It was to create a community and to create impact in a space that didn't have the positivity, and to really transform this lifestyle and make it more accessible, less judgmental, as I mentioned, and just a positive place for everyone to be part of change and celebrate change. So our mission obviously is to disrupt the way that the world thinks about the global food system. It's also kind of much more broader than that. We don't just talk about food, although that's the kind of primary I guess that's the way that we can create the biggest impact. But we do talk about many other things as well, as you can see here, and tech innovation when it comes to sustainability and style. There's a lot happening in the fashion industry and a lot more that needs to happen. So we're kind of like across the board there, talking about everything that is associated with living kindly. How can we do better to the planet, to each other, and to everyone that we share the planet with. And so, one thing that I think, was important for me when I was thinking about, how can I build a brand that is going to reach as many people as possible? And it was really about, not putting out, because veganism and eating plant-based, you could still consider that a niche. I mean, coming from 4 years ago to today is very different. And I think most people know someone who's vegan, or they are flexitarian themselves. Maybe, you have one meatless day a week or something like that. It's much different to that niche that it was 4 years ago, but it's still very niche. And so, in order to make your mission impactful, and it's specifically with something that is a niche, the way that I thought about it was, we need to create as many entry points as possible for people to find us, to make us more discoverable. How can we, how can we target people and make our content interesting to people who have maybe not even considered this lifestyle before, but maybe, would have an interest in travel, an interest in celebrity news, an interest in movie, tech, all of this stuff, because this mission impacts everything. And you can probably say that about many other missions and many other kind of progressive movements as well. It doesn't just impact one thing, it's very kind of intersectional, and it's across many aspects of your life. So, we obviously have kind of broadened the topic from just recipes and just news to really hone in on some of the other kind of verticals that we think, are going to be of interest to a more mainstream and broader demographic. So I can show you here. Obviously, you can see we have 4 main categories, and we have Eat Kindly, which is food; innovation, which is all about, progression in technology and business innovation; Entertainment, as I mentioned, celebrity news, movies, media, and style, which can be anything from home and living to fashion and cruelty-free beauty. And I will just show you a few examples of those. I just need to change my screen view so you can see that. So if we go here. So hopefully you'll be able to see my
We can.
browser desktop now. Good. Okay, so that was the homepage, and here is just an example of a news piece. So you can see here, obviously we talk about a lot of product launches. This is something that gets our community really excited because, you know, obviously with this movement, you know, one of the biggest kind of hurdles to get over as you move into this lifestyle is actually the accessibility to new products and, you know, discovering new things and knowing what to replace, you know, dairy or meat with. And so, you know, one of our, you know, biggest one of our kind of like biggest categories, I would say, is news and talking about new product launches. And so that's one that I would say is one of our, I guess, most popular categories. As you can see here, we have all of our different categories at the top of the page. And then you can see a mixture of like evergreen pieces, recipes, news. Here's the celebrity section. I'm sure a lot of you have kind of navigated this before. But as you can see, we've kept it as broad as possible so we can kind of, you know, make sure that we meet as many kind of like different interests as possible, as I mentioned. And I'll just go back to the screen 1 second. So, okay, so are we back to the, it doesn't show on my screen, we're back to, okay, great. Yeah, so I think that, you know, it would be great to kind of hear from maybe Lisa, whether you've kind of done something similar with your brands, like how do you kind of attract people into your niche and whether, you know, you look at, you know, different categories to reach a broader demographic of people?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things that's really interesting that you've kind of highlighted here is really thinking about the content like broadly, but also in terms of categories that will appeal to people and actually help them kind of navigate that content. So we've been thinking a lot along the lines of how do we educate like brands about all the different ways their packaging can be sustainable. And I think for us, part of the challenge has been like casting a wide enough net, but also making sure we're giving meaningful information that's actually useful to the specific brands we're targeting. So yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on kind of, and maybe you're going to talk about this, but when you think about who exactly you're targeting and how you offer the most value for them to help them actually, you know, take an action that drives impact.
Yeah, I think that, you know, this is something which I think a lot of brands don't necessarily think about is putting that kind of like either customer or the audience first, depending on, you know, what you're building, but really kind of putting yourself in their shoes and kind of understanding what standpoint are they coming from, what is their initial like interest or driver, and what is going to be the step that actually gets them to not only discover but stay on your site or buy your product. You know, what is that kind of hook? And yeah, like diversifying the way that people reach you is only going to, you know, offer a lot more opportunity to bring those people in. So yeah, I spend a lot of time personally, and even still to this date, kind of trying to put myself in the shoes of our audience and trying to understand from other people's perspectives. And so, you know, with Live Kindly specifically, you may think that we're, you know, a vegan company, but we actually don't make content for vegans. We, you know, naturally vegans will find us. And I think a good comparison would be something like Beyond Meat. So Beyond Meat is a vegan alternative to meat, and they actually position themselves in, I don't think always, but initially in the meat section of the grocery store, because they knew that vegans would find them. And I kind of feel the same about Live exactly. You know, vegans are going to find us. They're going to love our content. This is already part of their mission, and they're happy that someone is talking about this and, you know, highlighting something that they really believe in so much at their core. They're also some of our, you know, biggest supporters and the ones that will share the content the most. But in terms of who we're tailoring our content for, it's not them, because this is where we can create the most impact and the biggest change. And obviously this is what we're all about and what we want to achieve. But it would be great to kind of talk about, you know, with Lisa or Eleanor or anyone else on the call, you know, whether you have set your mission already, have you written it down, and, you know, what are the steps that kind of drove you to kind of build that? Like, what were the deciding factors? I always find that super interesting.
Sure, I can talk a little bit about that. I mean, basically, my mission was born out of spending over a decade in the fashion industry, working for large brands and co-founding one of my own brands, and just having the insights that, wow, fashion is super wasteful. And, you know, the business models of today operate on this linear system, which is take, make, waste. And things just go into landfills. And so at a certain point, I think I just thought I'd rather prioritize my creativity and my focus towards creating a solution here. And, you know, a lot of people probably will have heard the buzzword circularity, but it's really about closing the loop and making landfills a thing of the past. And actually, the Big Favorite was my great grandfather's company. So this sort of has a personal mission for me as well. And I just sort of brought all of my experience to it, and putting the energy towards changing the game in fashion and closing the loop.
I love that. I think that and it's so important as well. Like, I always find it so inspiring speaking to other founders and kind of hearing that passion that, you know, you have, that you're kind of solving a problem for yourself as well, because you have identified this and you live this, and you know exactly, you know, you've come from this place of being that consumer or the person that wanted this. So you know exactly kind of, you know, what people need. But at the same time, you know, as being a founder and developing that is so important not to lose it, and to kind of keep putting yourself back in that mindset. Yeah, that's always super exciting. And I think, you know, it's a good kind of step to the next slide, actually, where I wanted to talk about, you know, audience targeting and how do you maximize social impact. Again, like, as I mentioned, this is just such an important thing to kind of keep your mindset in, and wearing the shoes of the people who you not only think, not only are your current audience, but those that you really want to attract. And so obviously, if you're starting off and you don't have a customer base, or you don't have an audience base, it can be pretty difficult to really decipher what that should be. But in my experience, it's been such an iterative kind of an iterative process, and it's just been so interesting to see this as like a living, breathing thing that doesn't stay static. It constantly changes. Times change, situations change. I mean, look what's happened with the pandemic, and, you know, the way that we live our lives has completely changed. So we need to kind of continually adapt, like, who our audience is, and recognize who they are right now versus, you know, who we want them to be, and how do we bridge that gap. And so we're doing a lot of work around this now at Live Kindly, but, you know, we have always kind of had that front of mind for us. And, you know, you can break it down into a number of like more digestible steps, with like, because it can feel really overwhelming to think, well, you know, why would you define an audience when surely you want everyone to buy from you and everyone to read your content? Like, how do you really kind of get into the specifics? But of course, you know, and you know, this was always my approach. I was like, well, who wouldn't want to read Live Kindly? Who doesn't want to live more kindly? Who doesn't want to do better? And but really, there are some benefits into getting into the details, because this is where you can really maximize on growth. And that's not to say that, you know, people who don't fall into this bracket wouldn't find interest, but it's about how you can again kind of like maximize what you are going to do best, and to really appeal to the people that are going to help grow your brand. These are going to be the people that will share your content, that will help other people come into this to buy your product or to move into your mission. They're going to be brand ambassadors for you. These are going to be the most highly engaged people. And so really kind of like getting into the details there is a really important step. And it's something that, as I mentioned, we did when I founded the company, but also, throughout the entire process of building Live Kindly over the 4 years, we're still doing it to this date. So yeah, I think that, identifying demographics, it's important, as you can see on the slide, like, finding out who are those motivated people, who are the ones that are vocal, as I mentioned, being brand ambassadors, talking about you, sharing your content, bringing other people to subscribe to your mailing list, all of that. Who are the most engaged, commenting, and we'll talk about engagement later, but that's so much more important than almost anything else, is the engagement and showing that people really care about what you're saying. They have you're offering them a platform for a dialogue. It's not just this one-way thing where you're posting content and you are, making a statement. It's like this should be a two-way thing, especially when you're developing or trying to push forward a mission. This is creating a platform like this is such a huge opportunity for growth together with your community. So engagement is such a key part of what we do in that community aspect. So I think that, there are a number of ways in which you can obviously look at this. And the way that we have found most beneficial is, you can call it psychographics. We tend to call it like avatars, or you can even just call it personalities, but really kind of like trying to humanize what that audience would look like, and really trying to put a name to it, a face to it, so you can really kind of think about these as not just consumers, not just followers. And it's so cold. And I think that we have so much disconnect when we talk about social media between, the company and the follower, that we don't really have that connection anymore. And obviously, with times like this where we're living so much in a digital world, it's so important, I think, as brands, as much as you can, when you're talking about problems that are very human and missions that are very human, to make sure that your interactions and your thought process and everything that goes behind it stays at that human level. So I'm curious, before I kind of jump into the to kind of breaking down how we've developed our psychographics, whether anyone here is kind of had this experience with developing that, and how you target your audience. Like, what is your process, and does this kind of resonate with you too?
I actually have a quick question for you, Jody. How important is this in your hiring plan as well? Does that tie in at all?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, and interesting that you ask, because I just ahead of the mini class today, I was just taking an interview for a new team member, and I was thinking about that, because one of the most important things for me, and I think as I've built my team, it becomes more and more apparent that it's not only important to me, but important for everyone on the team as we scale our culture, is that we really want to work with people who, they don't necessarily have to be like 100% like vegan or in the mission or living that lifestyle, right? That's nice, but we wouldn't ever judge anyone by that, because that's not part of our value system. And we kind of want our team to reflect very much I guess the external culture that we're trying to build with our community as well. So I would say that they're very reflective of each other. We don't necessarily need people who are super vocal about it and, sharing about all of our content online. Obviously, when they're proud of something that they have produced, it's great to see our writers or our content creators share it because they're proud. But, for me, the most important thing is that they're excited about what we do. And they want to learn, they're hungry to grow with us, and they're hungry to make a change and see an impact, and they see value. I really think it's so important that people feel inspired to come to work every day because they feel empowered, like they are making a difference. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, and I definitely see that there's a connection between how we look at our audience versus how we kind of build our team internally.
Thank you.
I've just been invited on stage. Shall I intro myself quickly?
Do it.
So I'm the founder of Grazer. We're a vegan vegetarian dating app, but we're actually much more than that. We're creating a social hub for vegans and vegetarians to unite and also engage in activism. We have a mission statement that kind of underlies everything we do. And it's part, for us, engaging the audience in activism is our biggest thing now. After writing our mission statement, it kind of actually changed our focus. And moving forward, we're actually trying to incentivize people to engage in activism on our app with in-app perks and stuff like that. So our mission statement has completely changed our view of and scope of what we can do. And it wasn't kind of until recently in having a new co-founder on board that we reassessed that, and it just added a whole new level to what we're doing. And in terms of audience targeting, it was important for us to kind of change our tagline because we're more than just dating. So we kind of worked really hard on what our first impression is with our audience. So we don't put off, even though our core audience will always be vegan daters, 18% of our users use it for friend finding. And there's also vegetarians, and we also want to open it up to plant curious. So trying to find a word that kind of summed us up in a headline was really important for us in terms of targeting the maximum amount of people we can. So now we're called the Plant-Based Connection, which is way more kind of open, but gives us scope to kind of hone in on our market moving forward.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I think it's, thank you for sharing as well. I think it's super interesting, like specifically when you talk about the vegan sector, how even just the use of different words, I mean, this applies to everything, but just talking about this specific experience, the use of language is so important as well. This is something we get into a lot of detail in the full course when we talk about, really how to create your creative process and everything. But the use of the connotations that words bring, they're heavy and they're big. And I think that, really defining those and spending so much time on what might feel like a very small detail is actually, what can be a very kind of big factor in, how people connect with your brand and what their perception is of what you're trying to achieve. So I think it's interesting that you share that because, like I said, I think the mission process can be very iterative and it needs to kind of adapt and change with times and obviously with what you're trying to achieve. So yeah, that's super interesting. And I think that, this kind of leads on as well to, as I mentioned with the avatars and the psychographics, as you can see here, like breaking it down into how do you prioritize, because you're not just going to have like one type of person that you're trying to reach. Obviously, Lewis, as you said, you're trying to reach vegans and vegetarians and plant curious people. But how do you prioritize, and how do you know where you're going to create the most impact or get the most interest? And this obviously comes with also collecting data. You need to kind of first make some assumptions, right? Otherwise you can't really begin. But once you start collecting data and seeing actually what the reality is versus what you had hoped to achieve, then you can really start making the tweaks and the fine tuning, and learn how to get more specific with identifying that kind of tier 1 group of people. As you can see here, our tier 1, our first priority is non-vegans and the millennials and Gen Z, and you can see that the tier 2 and tier 3, they're all quite different to each other. And you can see underneath we have names here, and I can get into that into the full course, but seeing like the full scope of who these people are, as I mentioned, really humanizing them, putting a face to that name, talking about where they live, what their interests are, how do they discover you, like all of those details. It's super interesting. You kind of build this whole kind of fake personality. It's kind of, an interesting experience, but it really kind of helps you kind of like picture this in mind. Like when you're creating content, you kind of, you think about Jeff or you think about Jordan, you think, okay, so how would they respond to this? Would they be interested in this? Like, how could I tweak it so that person relates to it or finds value in what I'm building? So yeah, I think that that was really interesting to hear. Thank you for sharing. just moving on to the next slide as well. So these are some strategic pillars for content creation. And these are, I would say these are very specific to Live Kindly. So I'm just kind of putting them here so you can see kind of like what our step-by-step process is. And I can talk in a bit more detail about all of these, but I would love to kind of hear, you know, if anyone would like to share about what their step-by-step process is when they are creating content. You know, what process do you use? What do you go for in terms of how are you thinking about applying content to Instagram versus Facebook? How are you choosing your social media platforms, for example? And that's a very broad question, but I'm kind of curious to see like how people think about it as like a very kind of beginning stages. Like, what are your initial thoughts with your brand? How are you making these decisions, and where is appropriate to kind of apply, like, you know, the purpose and the mission and the values? How are you actually showing that in the content that you're creating?
Hi, this is Kathleen Gage, and one of the things that I noticed in a lot of the marketing that goes on is one generation that actually is being bypassed quite a bit is the older generation, the 60 plus, and I'm going to be 67 in 4 days. And what I see is there's a real need in that market, but that actually isn't my focus. My focus is I have a podcast called Plant-Based Eating for Health, and it's being rebranded as Vegan Visibility, where I'm actually helping authors, speakers, coaches, consultants, and startups to gain visibility primarily through writing books, content marketing, and getting on podcast shows. Because a lot of people have great content, but they'll load their book up to Amazon, or their publisher will, and they think that's the end of the story, where that's just the beginning of the story. So I'm very, very niched within the vegan plant-based industry on my podcast show. Anybody who's on my show has to be 100% plant or vegan. It used to be plant-based, now it's vegan, because initially I didn't want to be a crazy vegan, and now I'm definitely a crazy vegan after a few years. But I find that there's a real need for the older demographic, primarily because of healthcare issues and the fact a lot of people have given up after a certain age. They say, well, this is just the way it is. I'm unhealthy. It's in my genetics. And it's like, no, it's really at the end of your fork. So my whole deal is reaching the people that have market reach and helping them to get their message out there. And right now we're in the process of putting a masterclass together, a summit where I have 10 to 12 influencers within the industry that are all marketers and PR people, a book, and we've got about a 6-month window that we're taking all this to market.
Amazing. Wow, that's a lot. That's super exciting. And I think you're right. You know, I haven't seen anything out there. I mean, and talking about content in general, there's, you know, not a lot in terms of content that's targeting, you know, the older demographic. And I think that this is a huge missed opportunity. Obviously, you know, there's room for everyone. And I think having, you know, more inclusive content is super important with any mission, you know, because it's not age specific. So it's great to hear that you're doing that, Kathleen. I'm excited to see more. Just back on the kind of like the strategic pillars for content creation, I think it would be interesting to hear, and maybe everyone can like put something in the chat if you want to, or, you know, if you want to talk, also good. But I would be curious to hear, like, what do you think would be maybe like the top 5 or top 10 like key parts in optimizing content to make it more discoverable? Like, what would you think would be the top 5 or top 10?
We got some hands up, so I might let some people, or Ashley, if you can do it, let people answer that question, because optimizing content is something we spend a lot of time on in the main course. So let's see if we can get people to think about what are the top 5, top 10 things that you would do to optimize your content to be found. And I can see we've got some stuff going on in the chat.
I'm curious, maybe I will learn something new as well. I hope so.
Do we have anyone that's willing to take some guesses, like on voice?
I mean, I don't really know much about kind of optimizing content, but as a kind of consumer of content, what we're trying to do at Grazer is add value to our users. So making sure we're not just, I mean, it's kind of easy to fall into the kind of stereotype on kind of Instagram just to post like memes or whatever. And I think for us, we don't want to create that kind of throwaway content. We want our content to be purpose driven, but also feel like people who follow us are actually gaining some kind of something from following us and not just literally just consuming. So that's kind of where we're kind of taking our focus now, but I don't really know much about the kind of optimizing stuff, I would say.
I love that. That's a really good point. And it's actually something that I bring up a lot, is that I always want all of our content to have some value. And whether that, I mean, it could still be a meme, right? Value is also in laughter, but I think it's, putting yourself back into the follower or the consumer or the user, like, what did they get out of seeing that? Because we're so overloaded with content, it's so oversaturated. For one, it's hard to stand out, but for two, like, what value have you given them that would make them want to come back for more? So that's a really great point, Lewis.
And I think just to add to that, for us, we're at the very start of like creating content, and we've just been trying to think about how do we run like little experiments with content. So try to, do something in this area that helps brands understand more about, let's say, recyclability or recycled content, and kind of see how that impacts discoverability from the keywords we've included, and then how brands are actually engaging with that content and sharing it, because that also tells us how much value we're adding for them and education we're giving there. So that's kind of been helpful for us, is to just kind of map out like 5 big priorities, and really that should maybe be 3 to start, and just kind of test how each of those performs, and then double down on those areas once we see some good engagement there.
Oh, go ahead, Jody, please.
Go ahead.
Okay, here's a little hack that anybody who does writing, you can actually put a Kindle book together that is, 30, 40 pages of information, have several ethical bribes inside, and drive traffic back to an opt-in, or drive it back to a Facebook group, a LinkedIn group, wherever your market hangs out the most. And also you can do the KDP, which is the Kindle giveaway, where you have a 5-day period where you can give the book away. And you do a lot of promoting on the giveaway so that you get people to download it. And then inside, hopefully they take the action to go to wherever you're trying to drive them. And with the summit that we're doing, I was very strategic in who I invited to be a part of the summit. For example, John Oberg, who's had, I believe, 20 million or 200 million downloads on Twitter. He's a Twitter expert. He's definitely a vegan. And so when I approached him, I made sure to give him value for being a part of it. So it's really collaborative partnerships have worked well for me. The thing that I could really up my game with is the technical side of SEO, because I come from the originally doing a lot of organic marketing way back in the day.
Great point on the organic stuff as well. I think that, it's definitely true when you say way back in the day, because you have to do a lot more now to get organic reach. It's a lot tougher. They make you work for it, but it's not impossible, right? And I think that it kind of goes back to Lewis's point on value, that when you're creating value and you start getting engagement, this is where the organic really comes from. And this is where you can kind of like use that as a springboard for many other things. And so when it comes to optimizing content, I mean, obviously there's way more than 10, but you can see like we've broken them down here into the first 4. And then there's another kind of section. So I kind of break it down into 2. We have a creative and a technical checklist. For me, I'm stronger on the creative side of things. And so for me, it's really, talking about the brand aesthetic, like does it look appealing? There's so much kind of psychology that goes behind it when you see a logo, what that means to you, how it makes you feel, your experience on the website. So really looking into the UX of the website, all of that. And I get into the nitty gritty of things like image sourcing, why I would prefer to use actually some free stock sites versus Getty Images. And I can talk about that in more detail, but I have very strong feelings about it. Talking about brand voice and personality and how that comes through, and the language that you use, the words that you don't use, like what that says about your brand and the message that you're trying to convey. Also, you know, the decision-making process in terms of like what you do, what your brand does and what it doesn't do. And in terms of, you know, us specifically, it would really be what type of news we cover or what type of content we cover versus what we wouldn't cover. And it took us a long time to figure out what that was, because there's a lot to talk about. So yeah, again, like with all of these things, it's a big process, but it makes a big difference, and you can actually see results from it. As you can see here, you know, our time on site has gone from 1 minute to 5 minutes. Our bounce rate has gone down from 80% to 40%. And I can, you know, tell you more about what that means and how we got there. But, you know, all of these kind of like seemingly small steps and seemingly very detailed things can make a huge impact. And then jumping into the technical checklist, you can see that, you know, there's an awful lot that goes into that. It's much more than SEO and keywords, and even that is a lot to digest in itself. But it goes into, you know, content creation from the website to social. You know, how are you becoming more discoverable on each different platform, because they are all their own beast and they have very different algorithms, and, you know, learning about how to adapt your content and, as Lisa mentioned, like recycle content across different platforms is a way to, you know, really maximize the impact of all of the content you're creating, because it's not cheap to make content. So you want to get as much juice out of it as possible. But yeah, I think that, you know, as you can see, there's a lot to cover on those two topics when it comes to optimizing content. So a lot to walk through there. And then just hopping on to, I'm just being conscious of time. It's hard to put all of this in 1 hour. Oh my gosh, I could talk for so long. But yeah, no, I mean, just talking about engagement and why engagement matters. I mentioned this earlier, and I would love for maybe some people to guess at why you would think engagement is maybe better than or more important than building a big following, or is it?
I can say from kind of the little marketing we've done, when we involve influencers who maybe have slightly less of a following, they seem to have more engagement within their community, and we get much better response from that kind of marketing than, say, a platform that has 500,000 followers. The kind of trickle down effect that we get from the smaller content creators is actually way more useful for us. And so I think, yeah, the engagement is something that we're looking forward to actually targeting with our influencers moving forward, and not necessarily just the reach, but more how much do the influencers post, how much are people replying to them, is their comment section big, like all those kind of things are way more important to us than just how big their platform is.
That's interesting that you mentioned influencers, because we're in the middle of well, not in the middle, but we're in the process of, you know, building out our influencer network. And so we've actually found the same thing. And I think that, you know, the impact of, or the desire to really have like a big influencer on board, obviously they have a huge reach and everything, and there's huge benefits that come with that. But I'm curious that, you know, you've seen the same kind of results as I have. And I think that from my perspective, and I'm curious if you feel the same, like whether you feel that comes down to like the authenticity of, you know, their posts and their interaction with their community. That's how I imagine it is.
Yeah, I think also, I mean, you kind of get the same with kind of like, for example, talk shows. You know, if a celebrity goes on a big talk show, perhaps they don't get the same kind of engagement as, say, their podcast, which has a small amount of people, but they have a much hardened following that are actually there because they love that person instead of just watching a TV show because everyone watches it. And I think it's the same with content. There's some pages that I follow that I just follow to follow, and not necessarily I'm looking for their content all the time or looking forward to them posting. Whereas there's some influencers that are smaller that I'm way more aligned with and way more engaged with. So I think that's kind of the difference that we've highlighted, how we kind of want to move forward with our influencer marketing.
Cool. And I guess, you know, just talking about, you know, how it impacts us and why we focus so much on it. And, I think there's definitely a desire, obviously, to grow a big following, and I'm not saying that that doesn't matter. It's definitely important, but as you can see the algorithms changing, I think you can definitely see when people have big followings and not a lot of engagement, what that's signifying is that their audience really isn't getting much out of their content, or they don't have much interest in what they're saying. And so for us, as I mentioned, it's so important to create that dialogue with our community and build out that community first and foremost. It's the authenticity that comes with it is really what helps us learn as well. When you're looking at the comments, you can really kind of decipher what people do and don't agree with, what they like. And that doesn't always inform our decisions, but it's always something that we glean information from and we do learn from. Obviously boosts SEO as well when you're getting a lot of interaction early on after your first post, within the first few minutes. That is going to signify whether that is going to go viral or at least kind of take off to, if it's going to do well. And then as I mentioned, it informs other content. So it can also help us really decide on what does and doesn't work for our community, or whether we do need to change something to, as I mentioned before, meet the audience that we do want to attract. Obviously, it helps us achieve our mission because we get to really make an impact and a difference in people's lives, and we hear that from them every day, which is something that's so rewarding that comes with this too. This is just an example here. As you can see, that the 10 reasons you shouldn't go vegan doesn't sound like a piece of content that we would produce, but there's a reason that this is one of our top performing articles of all time. I think it was written like 2-3 years ago, maybe, but still remains like one of the top pieces. And it's a tongue-in-cheek kind of counterintuitive thing. It's obviously, a humorous piece, but this is something that has continuously gets a lot of emails and comments and interaction around. So I think, having that playfulness and really putting something out there that gets people talking is super important, and having that call to action. And just jumping to the next slide as well. Just wanted to show you, some key engagement tactics. As you can see, I'll go into a lot more detail about this in the next couple of weeks. It's so hard to kind of stop. And but yeah, it's really kind of like focusing in on like the visual aspect. So, a friendly face or a recognizable face, obviously celebrities do very well. We might be ashamed to admit it sometimes, but everyone is kind of nosy in what they're up to. And especially if it aligns with something that is, in alignment with your purpose and what you believe in. So these are some of the two kind of like biggest articles of the last month. Using a recognizable brand in the hero image is also something that people do engage with very frequently as well. And, anything that is kind of like humorous or has a question, like a call to action, like I mentioned, can really help optimize engagement and encourage that dialogue and that, community building aspect, on all of the social media posts that we do. I know we have only a few minutes left, but I would be curious just to learn about other people's experience with, how do they optimize their content for engagement, and what learnings have you seen?
Yeah, I think for the Big Favorite, we look at channels individually and what is working for each. Obviously, TikTok being like the newest thing and everybody sort of rushing over there, and Instagram is sort of hit or miss these days. We really are looking at the trends on a channel by channel basis and making an analysis based on that. And then we're also asking ourselves, what are our high level goals and what are we good at? And then we prioritize the channels where that all meets. Because like you were saying, there's just so much. It's so fragmented now that it can really become unfocused. And so I think what's been really working for the Big Favorite is prioritizing the things that we know we're good at and what our product and what our mission fits into. And that's how we sort of have been having success.
I'm curious on your take of Clubhouse. Somebody just posted about Clubhouse and I was thinking the same thing. Where do you see engagement going with Clubhouse and driving that to other platforms?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, and it's not something that we've ventured into just yet. We do have plans to move into more kind of like events and webinars, it's not our primary focus at the moment for Live Kindly, but in terms of, you know, how I see it faring in the future, you know, in the, you know, in the world and its current climate and everything, I think people are really, you know, wanting more connection that is in a different format to Zoom. And so I do think that there is a good opportunity to build communities there and groups. And I would say that, you know, it's not going to work for everyone, right? But I do think that there is a lot of value to be had there, especially from a community building aspect. So, you know, I have a lot more to learn on the Clubhouse aspect. I've joined a few. Don't think it's right for Live Kindly right now, but I do think that, you know, in any way that you want to kind of like get a group of people together on a very specific mission-driven topic, this is a great place to at least try out. So I would be interested to learn from all of you who have experienced more of it than, you know, to share your experience with me, because I'm really not too familiar on Clubhouse at all just yet. Yeah, and I guess, you know, we're kind of almost at time with 2 minutes to go, which is crazy to see how quickly that's gone. Yeah, so much more to talk about, but, you know, it's been really fun to like engage with you all, and I'm hoping to meet more of you on the full course in a couple of weeks from now. I guess I'll kind of hand it over to you, Brooke, but this was super
Yeah.
fun.
Why don't we stick around maybe for a couple more minutes, get some questions from the audience. But before we do that, I want to say, you guys, we've put together, you know, a course for you guys that's going to move you 10 years ahead in what you know about the strategies and tactics. This was like a little teaser, a little taster, but we dive so deep on this stuff. So if you guys want to take a look at joining us, we're going to send out this on-demand video after you're going to have this. But Jody's going live May 24th to 27th, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern time. And we're diving deep into monetization tactics, engagement tactics, optimizing to be found and getting that reach, content creation, both that creative checklist and the technical checklist, hitting that audience and really solidifying that mission. We even have some cameos from some monetization experts from Vice, some SEO experts. So we really are going to move you 10 years ahead. Take a look. We're going to send out the link to the full course. You guys have a look, but it's $99 and we're a pay once, attend forever model. So if you miss a night, we're taping. If you want to do this a couple times over, you do it. But what I'd love to do now is maybe, Jody, do you have one or two, can you take one or two questions from the audience? We do have a Q&A tab as well.
Yeah, would love to.
Okay, let me take a look at the Q&A. One of the questions asked in the Q&A was, Jody, is an inclusive versus exclusive approach a key element of your strategy when you launched Live Kindly?
Yeah, 100%. I would say that that was, and still is, it remains like one of our core focuses. So, you know, I think that when it comes to veganism specifically, it's kind of been known as, you know, it has the connotation of being quite an elitist group. And so we really wanted to change that and completely make it as inclusive and, yeah, as I mentioned before, non-judgmental, empowering and inspiring as possible. So a really positive community that, you know, unfortunately, we don't see that often these days, but yeah, something that we strive towards every day.
Good to know. Okay, I've allowed a couple people access to the panel if you guys want to jump in and ask your question of Jody. Who do we have? Just jump on in. Do we have anyone? Let's see. Talking permitted. Okay, well, we'll add a few more people. I'm adding people with questions up. We'll take 2 more questions. So just jump in. Yeah.
I have a question. When did your blog become bigger than what it is? You know, obviously now you've got the whole investment side of things, and it's just it's now way bigger than a blog. So how did that journey happen, and what were the decisions to kind of why you went that way?
Yeah, you know what, 4 years ago, it's kind of crazy to say, but it feels like it almost happened overnight to an extent. So the website really wasn't up for that long until it got a lot of organic traction on Facebook initially. This is where we have our biggest following, I think over 1.3 million there right now. And so, yeah, we kind of took off in the time where organic growth was just like, you know, it was very easy to achieve. Now it's a bit more of a struggle, still possible. But it happened very quickly. And then in terms of like scaling it from what was, you know, I guess you would say a small blog, but it wasn't just myself, it was a small team of people to more of a business. you know, thankfully I met Brooke very early on, and she actually helped me fundraise. So she was a great advisor, helped me bring in the first million. Obviously we've scaled, you know, much more since then in a short space of time, but I definitely recommend taking one of Brooke's fundraising courses as well. So
Shameless plug, Fundraising 101, also on offer, $99. We're actually live this week, but back to you, Jody.
Yeah. So that was kind of it in terms of like how we kind of went from, I guess, you know, I really hate using the word blog so much. I don't know what it is, but that's kind of how we went. It was very natural, and also I hate to admit it, but I was just learning as I went along. So I didn't really plan for any of this, but as the opportunities arose, I kind of just took them on head on. And I think it was a mixture of, you know, great brand positioning, good timing, and just a willingness to learn, because I didn't have the full skill set to do this, but I learned, and I, you know, connected with the right people. So I was very lucky in that sense. And I think listening to other people when you want to kind of move from a certain size to another size, it's important that you take advice from other people. Not everyone. You need to be careful with who you listen to, but yeah, definitely leaning on the experts is, you know, I think how we made that transition.
Okay.
I have a question. On the fundraising, I definitely wrote down your course, plan to take both your courses. This is phenomenal.
Awesome.
And I've had my business 27 years and I'm still learning, you know, so I love what you said about you didn't know always what you were doing, Jody, but in your fundraising, what was your primary resource? Was it crowdfunding? Was it product sales, advertising?
For fundraising, no, it was seeking out angel investors. So, you know, we didn't do any crowd sourcing or anything like that. I'm trying to think whether we did have some capital coming from a VC as well, but mostly from angel investors. But definitely, I definitely recommend Brooke to talk in more detail about the technicalities there.
Yeah, we spend a good 8 hours on learning how to raise money and how to present yourself in front of VCs and angels. So you can check out Fundraising 101 on classrebel.com, but we'll definitely get you 10 years ahead. I have a lot of experience doing it, good and bad, and you know, we'll get you through.
Great.
Any other questions before we high five and eat some snacks and go on with our day, and then see you in class in 2 weeks? Any other questions from who we've got, who's raised their hand and we've got allowed to chat?
Yeah, I'd love to ask Jody. My name is Susanna. I don't know, I can't turn on my video, so I do apologize, but I'd love to know how to convince family and friends. So it's not.
Oh, did we lose audio?
I lost the audio. I can't hear her. Maybe we could take somebody else if there's one last question.
Yeah, this is Stefania from Kindvertising. I also can't turn my video on. I hope that's okay. I just was curious to know from everyone how people are handling wanting to be on social media and advertising on social media for obvious reasons. I mean, it's an integral part of any communication strategy, whether you're in marketing or not. And the discrepancy and cognitive dissonance that is arising in a lot of people who are kind of disappointed with the way that many social media platforms are handling things like civil rights and equality and inclusivity, and not taking the steps that they should be as companies to move in that direction.
Yeah, I'm hoping that I understand the question right. So correct me if I'm hearing this wrong, but from our perspective, you know, obviously we have clients who are advertising with us, and, you know, it's very difficult to also decipher who we do want to work with. We don't just accept money from anyone. Obviously, there's a lot of issues with a lot of companies out there, like you said, for many, many reasons, but, you know, specifically with what we're talking about with the greenwashing, things like that, you know, this comes up a lot. Also companies who may be like meat companies that are introducing plant-based food options. We really had to have a conversation around whether we would kind of take money from from them, and how that would reflect on our brand. So I don't know if I'm understanding the question right, but it's a tricky thing to navigate. And I think that you really need to decide what's right for your brand. And I think also holding your brand up to accountability and making sure that you are completely transparent with your audience, with what your intentions are. So not just disclosing the fact that you have a sponsorship partnership with them, but really kind of making sure that there is some kind of awareness with why you are partnering, why you're working together, and how it kind of benefits both. And that you can't really say this directly, but I think obviously the community has an awareness that you're trying to sell something to them. So how do you position that in a way that is transparent enough but doesn't feel kind of cheap? And yeah, it's a really difficult one, and we're still navigating that as well and finding our feet with it. And especially as we kind of ramp up our monetization right now, we're going to face this a lot. We have a lot of brands that want to work with us, but we wouldn't necessarily want to work with them. So it's not an easy route when you're kind of mission driven and you have a set of values and ethics. It's a difficult field to navigate for sure.
Right. Thank you so much. I did actually, just to clarify, I meant the actual social media channels themselves. They are not taking the correct steps in terms of equality, inclusivity, and civil rights, particularly Facebook, Instagram, which is owned by Facebook. And yes, I think that it probably comes down to the same thing, who you decide to work with, whether it's a client or a platform that you're advertising on or have a presence on. But I'm just curious to know if anyone else is starting to deal, to have more and more difficulty dealing with this, because it seems to be kind of a mounting issue. And there's even talks about, Facebook kind of reaching the end of their road, so to speak, because of kind of the steps that they haven't been taking. And there's been several incidents in that sense.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. Yeah, no, actually, we did have a conversation about that with my team when, this was kind of hot off the press. And it's difficult because, we use this platform really as one of the core key pillars of creating impact and reaching our community. So it's such a difficult thing to navigate. I think a lot of big companies were able to step back because this is not where they generate a lot of their revenue. And this was just more about kind of making a public stand. So they had more of the ability and the position to be able to do that. With us, it was, content is where we make our money. The good thing is that, we were able to really make sure that we could put as much on our first party platform, so on the website, and funneling into the content creation that lives on our website, our own platform, as possible. It's not always going to be an easy answer. And I empathize with your struggles too, because it's a difficult one.
Truly is. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts.
I'll just add quickly to, like, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter aren't the only platforms out there. Like, get really experimental with like LinkedIn. Where we do analysis of the traffic coming to our site all the time, and that's like one of the biggest drivers. So I think that there are other platforms out there. I mean, there are people starting Substacks all the time. Like, newsletters have become incredibly important. And there was one other one I was going to mention. Oh, we're actually building our own, not an app. But I'm not going to give away all my secrets, but we're looking at like what is going to be after Facebook and Instagram and when that all gets split up. So we're getting really creative with how to engage our consumers in a different way. So I think this is an opportunity for you just to experiment and get really, really creative with the tools that are out there.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Eleanor. As a company, we've already internally made the commitment to kind of phase out Facebook and Instagram in particular by the end of the year, at least in a monetary sense, just because we don't feel comfortable with some of the kind of recent events. But I think you're right that there's a lot of opportunities. It's just really, really tough, as Jody pointed out, because so much of the engagement is still on those platforms. So it's a bit of a kind of a cognitive dissonance. And that's why I was really interested to know what everyone else in this panel was thinking. Thank you again for sharing your thoughts.
You guys, I think we're going to wrap up here. There's probably more questions. Thank you so much for spending your time with Jody and Class Rebel. We hope we see you in class in 2 weeks. It's going to be really good. We go really deep, and we're going to deliver a skill set that gets you guys 10 years ahead in the strategies and tactics to build your million-person movement. Thank you again for everyone being here. Thank you, Jody. And hopefully we'll see you guys in class live and spicy in 2 weeks. See you
Yeah.
guys.
Good job, Jody. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good job,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
very
Good
much.
job. Yeah,
Thanks,
loved
guys.
it.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
See you in class.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
In class. Bye.